Hello once again. I am George Barrow and will be your producer and organiser for this event. We recently presented our first two live online sessions, which were all about shell companies and laundromats. There's a change of gear today as we move to look at some fascinating stories involving some well-known names and their various deeds and misdeeds. We'll have a moderated Q&A afterwards, so please feel free to submit any questions you have throughout the presentation on the Q&A tab to the right of your screen. Now, we are running these events for free and you're welcome to keep coming as long as you like on that basis, but we'll just mention that there is a donate button to the registration page on our website for those who would like to support our pro bono work. Now, I shall leave you in the capable hands of Graham and Ray to kick us off, and I hope you all have a good time.
Thanks, George. Hello, and welcome to this third topic in the Dark Money Files live online series, in which we shine a light remotely into a murky world. I'm Ray Blake, and with me is my co-host, friend, and business partner, Graham Barrow. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ray.
And now, as George intimated, this one's a bit different, isn't it?
It is, Ray, and it's based on the premise that celebrities are inherently interesting and celebrity misbehaviour is more interesting again.
Yeah, I think there are whole channels on the TV that work on that premise, Graham.
You're right.
But we can't just do a cheap channel clip show, Graham. There needs to be a connecting theme to hold it all together, surely.
And I think I'm way ahead of you on that, Ray. Watch this space.
Will do. Just before we dive in, then, a reminder that you can submit questions as we go along that we'll address at the end, and that we'd love to hear from you after the event with your thoughts.
Yes, we would. Now, Ray, let's go for a stroll along Mulay Boulevard.
Mulay, you say?
Oh, yes, Ray. Named after a key figure in the laundromat money laundering activity who signed all the corporate paperwork, pretty much. We'll find he crops up quite a bit today. In fact, he connects most of the stories we'll feature, encompassing, well, famous rock and roll singers, politicians, and the odd author.
Okay, so for people who may not be up to speed on the legend of Ali Mulay, Graham, can you give us the 5-minute briefing on him, why he's significant, and maybe tell the story of how we were instrumental in tracking him down?
I would be delighted to, Ray. He's significant. I mean, I call him a cipher. He's somebody who embodies a whole story just by being him. And that makes him significant because he has signed so many sets of accounts. In fact, because we're doing this piece of work, George, who introduced us, is doing a lot of this. We've already identified 2,200 UK limited liability partnerships on whose behalf Mr. Mulay has signed the accounts. I'll say that again, 2,200 separate partnerships. And that
That's a big number.
It is quite a big number. And when you look at the individual accounts that he signed, it's over 6,300 sets of accounts, all with his signature on. And do you know, Ray, sadly, I've never actually found one yet that I've looked at and thought that's legitimate. How did we come across Mr. Mulay in the first place? Well, there was this big story about the Deutsche Bank mirror trades, and one of the things that came out of it was that a couple of UK limited liability partnerships had been utilised as part of that mirror trading process. And when I had a look at these LLPs, because it's free on Companies House, they had the same accounts. I mean, literally, didn't they, Ray? They had the same accounts. They were mirrors of each other, and he signed both of them, and it just triggered an interest. So I started having a hunt around, and as we're going to see, found a few quite well-known stories that his name appeared on as well, as long as a whole host of others. So I mentioned this. We're going to meet an author later on. I will save his identity for the time being, but that author and a fine journalist called Jane Bradley, we got together and decided it would be really good fun and interesting and a good story to go and see if we could find him. Is he real? Does he exist? And the answer was yes, he was. He was a dentist and he worked in Brussels, although he's not Belgian and had previously lived in Latvia. And prior to that, actually, he trained here in the UK in Gravesend. And with the benefit of a rather sloppy social media habit and other members of the family who were even sloppier in their social media habits and a bit of detective work, we eventually tracked down his address to a suburb of Brussels, and Jane Bradley hopped on a train and went and interviewed him. And the story is on BuzzFeed News back in August 2 years ago.
Fantastic. He's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't he?
He is.
So what's our first stop, Graham, on Mulay Boulevard?
So Ray, it is a couple of famous faces who fell to the curse of Ali Mulay.
Now, that's a face I recognise, Graham.
Even without the orange suit on, yes. Because that's Paul Manafort, Ray. That was President Trump's first campaign manager.
Ah, and who's that with him?
Now, that's a gentleman who's called Oleg, if I can say his name right, Deripaska, and he's the boss of a couple of big Russian companies called EN Plus and Rusal.
A very wealthy man, then?
Well, just a bit, Ray. And some would regard him as exemplifying the maxim that you should never ask a Russian oligarch how he made his very first million.
Well, I've certainly heard that said. So what connects these two guys, Graham? I mean, Manafort is a US national. Even in times he was free to roam more widely, he was based in the United States. Deripaska was and is based in Russia.
Well, Ray, they're connected by a court case, and that's involving a company called Chornomor, excuse my pronunciation because that's Ukrainian, and I believe it means Black Sea. And it also involves a complex ownership structure, and that included a UK limited liability partnership called Kohlberg Projects LLP.
Now, that company was based in Ukraine here. So the natural place for the lawsuit to be brought was Ukraine, right?
Well, you'd think so, but no.
Well, let's see where it was actually brought.
Oh, is that Cuba, Ray?
Not quite. We need to zoom in a bit more.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that the Cayman Islands? Well, of course. Ray, that's where I go with all of my litigation.
Well, you and me both, Graham.
So here is the BuzzFeed story detailing the Chornomor deal and the falling out. It shows that Deripaska gave, in inverted commas, Manafort $26.25 million for the deal. Ray, bear that figure in mind.
I will do.
It's relevant because here are the accounts for Kohlberg Projects as filed at Companies House and signed off by Ali Mulay.
I recognise the signature, Graham.
Many people will, Ray, I suspect. Now, what was that deal supposedly worth again?
$26.25 million, Graham. I've written it down.
No sign of that in the accounts, though.
No, I can't see any trace of that. It's sad, though, isn't it, when two friends fall out and have to go to court over money?
It is, Ray, and it seems to happen an awful lot, doesn't it?
Suspiciously often, I'd say. Wouldn't it be a great way to launder money? Get a court judgment that requires you to pay over a large sum. It's court sanctioned, so no worries about provenance. And of course, the court doesn't have to conduct any due diligence on the source of funds or wealth.
Oh, Ray, you've got a sneaky mind.
As often been said, Graham.
But let's move on. Anyway, we are most certainly now on Mulay Boulevard. So shall we have a wander further down the boulevard?
Yeah, let's do that. And having mentioned Ukraine.
Oh, this is Victor. He used to run Ukraine.
Yes, he did. And this is where he used to live.
Isn't that lovely? That is former President Yanukovych's winter palace, the Mariinsky Palace, which he abandoned shortly before leaving the country in early 2014, following what's become known as the Maidan Revolution. Now, one of the things, Ray, that consistently gets mentioned is Mr. Yanukovych's golden toilet. But a brief internet search soon reveals that there is a lot of fake news about this item and a variety of photographs masquerading as the real thing without the proper or indeed any provenance to support that assertion.
Yeah, would you say it's a case of fake news, Graham?
Oh, perhaps, Ray, but I might not say it out loud.
I dispute that, Graham.
True, and I'm only hacked off because you got the joke in before I did. Anyway, I think we can confidently say, though, that this is a picture of his very modest games room.
It's a lovely place, isn't it?
It's commodious, Ray. Now, now in 2017, 3 years after Victor was drummed out of the country, Kyiv hosted the 2017 Eurovision Song Contest.
They did. Everyone had a lovely evening. The contest was won by Portugal with the song Amar Pelos Dois.
For those in our audience who don't speak Portugal, and I suspect for the benefit of those who do, Ray, what does that mean?
Well, Graham, as you know, it translates as love for both of us.
Oh.
It was performed by Salvador Sobral and written by his sister Luisa Sobral. This was Portugal's first win and first top 5 placing in 53 years of participation, the longest winless run by a country in Eurovision history.
Oh, what a lovely story. And can we augment the loveliness, Ray, by saying where the UK was placed?
15th, Graham. It was Lucy Jones singing Never Give Up on You.
Oh, they don't write them like that anymore.
Well, they're not allowed to, Graham.
Anyway, when he was in power, Yanukovych got fed up with having to be driven through traffic everywhere. So he decided he wanted a helicopter landing pad right next to the office.
It's a hard life running a country. I don't think we can begrudge our leaders these little conveniences.
And at least this little convenience wasn't made out of gold, Ray.
Well, that's a very good point, Graham. Anyway, he wanted a heliport, and this is the one that they built for him.
And this is where there was an after party held at quite some expense by the Ukrainian state broadcaster for the Eurovision. Recognise the building?
I do, Graham. It's that heliport again, isn't it? It's owned by a British company called Fine Road Business LLP, registered in Potters Bar.
You know, Potters Bar hosts a rather inordinate number of UK registered companies that have cropped up in our investigations.
Yeah, that's true. And those firms control money and assets right across the world, just like this one, owning a former heliport and now party venue in Ukraine.
And this one is a company which, according to the BBC, issued the invoice for use of the building and is still owned by people closely linked to the Yanukovych regime.
Do you want to see their accounts?
Oh, yes. Well, look who it is again.
We never left Mulay Boulevard, but we're going to now.
Indeed, because as we wander down Mulay Boulevard, our attention is caught by a small side road called Lonely Street. But, Ray, what's that building lurking at the bottom?
That one down there, Graham. That'll be Heartbreak Hotel, Graham. Remember the song?
I am old enough to remember almost when it was first released, Ray. That was Mr. Presley at his moodiest, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Would you be surprised to know he's apparently alive and well and living in Carmarthen?
I would.
Here he is.
Whoa.
He was the secretary and director of a company called TCB (brackets Global brackets Limited) until it dissolved quite recently on the 19th of November 2019.
And was it just him at the helm of this global business, Ray?
Graham, I'm glad you asked. No, it wasn't. There's a set of other directors who were involved.
What, in Carmarthen?
Well, not quite, no. Here's the first one.
Agra, which many of you will know is the home of the rather exquisite Taj Mahal.
It is, yeah, but Piyush is in less salubrious premises, I'm afraid.
It would seem so, yes.
Another director is in Lagos. Do you want to see where he hangs out?
I'd love to.
There you go.
Okay. That's a bit odd, actually, Ray.
What's odd, Graham?
Well, do you not think there's a bit of a contrast going on here between the barbed wire on the one hand and the wide open gate on the other?
I see what you mean. It's a bit of a mixed message, really, isn't it?
Yes. I'm going to ask this quite hesitatingly, Ray. Where are we going next?
We're going to South Africa next, Graham.
Other end of the continent. Okay, they're not kidding when they say global, are they?
No, they're not. Now, this address here doesn't actually exist.
Oh?
No, it's a real road, but the street numbering in Johannesburg follows the American model and doesn't start at number 1 on all roads. This one's quite a short road, but the street numbers don't reflect that. So here's a typical property on that road from about halfway along it.
Okay, and I don't know whether you did this deliberately, Ray, but that's that mixed message again. You've got the barbed wire saying keep out, and then the big gap that says come on in.
It's an odd coincidence, isn't it? And then there's Michelle.
Mabel, Soleil Moki Vendre Trebier Ensemble. Not that
I
one,
think this is a different one.
Okay, well, it may be, but that's a much nicer address, isn't it? That's Hollywood, Ray.
Have you been to LA, Graham?
No, I haven't.
Well, let me explain then. Sunset Boulevard is actually a very long road, and West Hollywood is quite different from Hollywood.
Oh, do you mean they don't make films there?
Well, they do make films there, but they're how can I put this? Different films, perhaps, Graham. Do you want to see where that address is?
I'd love to. Yes, please.
Well, here it is.
Oh, that's a bit underwhelming, a bit disappointing. But look, Ray, it says park in rear.
Yes, it does, Graham. It does say that. We're not in Tinseltown anymore, are we?
No. But hey, now this firm presumably has a person with significant control, a PSC, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. The PSC is what we'd think of as an ultimate beneficial owner, or UBO, the person who effectively owns and controls the business.
And the observant amongst you might notice that Mr. Close has the same date of birth and address as the aforementioned Elvis.
Shall we see where they hang out together?
Oh, yes, please.
It's here. It would seem to be the flat above this shop.
Oh, well, it does say global.
Yeah, but it doesn't really say rock star, does it?
No, perhaps not.
It's an interesting point, though. How does a chap called Elvis Presley, living above a shop in Carmarthen, recruit an international team of directors at rather down-at-heel addresses across different continents?
Yeah, I mean, where did they meet, for instance? And how do they manage the business when, realistically, they can rarely, if ever, be together?
I have so very many questions about this company, Graham.
But it's dissolved now, Ray. Elvis has left the building.
Indeed. But back to Mulay Boulevard. Possibly the most imposing residence on this street is the one called Lantana.
Yes, Lantana. It's the company featured here in The Guardian. A glance at the headline and the sub-headline says it all, really. UK firms laundered millions, and the FSB, which for those who don't know is effectively the Russian Secret Service, and Putin's family are implicated.
And the report continues. It explains how a whistleblower at Danske Bank uncovered a very important inconsistency. Tell us more, Graham, about the whistleblower and what he discovered.
Well, it kind of relates to some of the things that we've been showing you, except he was doing this a bit before us, because back in the early 2010s, the whistleblower's name's Howard Wilkinson, was head of the trading desk at Danske Bank in Estonia, and he was doing business on behalf of this company. And noticed that a lot of money was flowing daily through its account. And when I say a lot, we're talking millions some days. So he spent £1, Ray, because in those days, Companies House wasn't free. So he spent £1 and looked at their accounts and was somewhat surprised to see that they were filing dormant accounts. They weren't even filing a few grand like ours. So he mentioned that to his colleagues and said, well, this company, Lantana, is doing all this business. They're not putting in their accounts. And kind of forgot about it for a while. And when he looked 3 months later, they'd filed amended accounts, which is quite exciting. Except it didn't show millions, it showed about 40 grand now, and kind of indicated to him that somebody in the bank had tipped off Lantana that people were looking at their accounts. So having failed to really attract any attention within the bank, he ultimately leaked this information to the Estonian regulator, I believe, who became quite interested in what was going on. Consequently, Mr. Wilkinson ended up leaving the bank, and I believe still is not working to this day. He has dropped out of sight, which appears to be the price you pay for doing the right thing. But by the time he did that, it wasn't just Lantana. He'd identified a whole number of UK LLPs at Danske Estonia who were doing very similar activity.
Absolutely. So all of this began with Howard seeing millions of dollars going through the account of a company, which, when he checked on Companies House, was reporting nothing of the kind. And here we have those accounts.
The amended, and I ridiculously over-egged the amendment. It wasn't 40 odd, it was 14. Yeah, as I say, these are the amended ones as well. But do you know, they look remarkably similar to the ones we've just been looking at, Ray. But ostensibly got nothing to do with Mr. Yanukovych or indeed Oleg Deripaska.
No.
Well, there you go. Anyway, that kind of brings us to the end of the main boulevard, I believe. Oh, Ray, hold on. Before we leave entirely, there's a little side road there.
Yeah, a little cul-de-sac called Brewer Lane.
Well, who are those people hanging around looking a bit sheepish?
Well, let's see. Now look, that's Vince Cable. He used to be a minister in the coalition government, and he went on to lead his party, the Liberal Democrats, for a little while.
He did, and that is James Cleverly. He was chairman of the other party in that coalition.
And what connects them, Graham? Not snakish shenanigans, surely.
Go on, try saying that quickly 3 times, Ray.
Do you know, I'm not sure I could.
Well, what connects them? They were the targets of a couple of companies formed by a company formation agent called Kevin Brewer, and I should say a highly reputable company formation agent. And he wanted to highlight some of the issues around the lack of due diligence on company formation. So he created 2 new companies and named them in a very witty way as their directors.
Is that a problem?
Well, not necessarily. After all, the writer who we referred to earlier and journalist Oliver Bullough did much the same thing. Now,
he's one of the good guys, right?
Very much so. Oliver, as you know, wrote the best-selling book Moneyland, which is a fascinating and quite disturbing read about how the world facilitates the lifestyles of the rich in ways that aren't available to the remaining 99.9% of us.
And we've worked on a few investigative projects with him in the last couple of years.
Yes, we have. Not just the one I mentioned earlier with Jane finding Mr. Mulay, but another one which got me into a bit of a Twitter spat with the head of a particular country's government.
I suspect it will be a while before we're welcoming St Kitts and Nevis, Graham.
You could well be right there, Ray.
So what got Kevin into trouble and not Oliver?
Well, Oliver made himself a director of Crooked Crook Limited, which is fine. You can call your company pretty much what you want. Kevin, on the other hand, decided to appoint Vince Cable and James Cleverly as directors of their own companies, but without bothering to tell them first. But he did report himself to Companies House and told them exactly what he'd done, which was, as it turned out, not so fine because he got himself fined.
And to date, he's the only person who's been prosecuted for giving false information to Companies House.
As far as we're aware, absolutely. And bear in mind, generally speaking, that they don't normally bat an eyelid at all sorts of nonsense.
Indeed, Graham.
It's just, I love that first one, Ray.
Mm.
It is the paradoxical company.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely. Anyway, Ray, I think that's the end of the road now. So let's go over to George for questions. There's still time to submit questions using the Q&A facility, and we're very happy to look at any questions you want to raise.